Emotional Cripples is an entertainment podcast which contains frank discussions about mental health. Listener caution is advised.
Welcome to Emotional Cripples, a podcast about male mental health. I'm a male, I'm a man, I'm Andrew Lowe, and with me is Tim Tucker.
That's me. I'm also male.
He's also a man. And so what we thought we'd do was talk about male mental health. And we're not, by talking about men's mental health, we're not excluding women. You could technically say that we are excluding women, but...
Technically, yes, but...
I sort of prefer to think of it as we're focusing on men rather than excluding women. So this is episode 1, sort of episode 0, really, the pilot. Keep listening and we'll tell you a bit more about who the hell we are and why we're doing this.
Yeah, and later on, Andy's going to be talking to somebody who does CBT, or Cognitive Behavioural...
Cognitive?
Wait a minute. Cognitive Behavioural Therapy. That's the one, isn't it?
Yeah.
CBT. So to see how that approaches male mental health, obviously in later podcasts we'll look at other kinds of therapy.
Then we're going to be recommending a couple of things. In this episode we've got an app that can help with the social media noise, dampen down that a little bit. And a really good book about a writer who suffered severe anxiety and depression and managed to pull himself back from the brink, quite literally actually, and learn to manage his mental health issues and enjoy life again. And
and I'm going to reveal how a brush with raving was my first result of being involved with mental health issues. Yeah. Obviously,
when you say a brush with raving,
well, actually, a deeply entrenched raving lifestyle was my first reaction. We'll talk more about it later, but that's my tease. Yeah. It's not a very good tease, really. I kind of give it all away.
Yeah, no, I'm interested. I'm intrigued. And I'm also another thing that's going to happen is I'm going to reveal my own particular happy place. In the real world.
You told me this once, and I've forgotten what it was. I was trying to tell somebody the other day.
Yeah. Well. Keep listening.
I better keep listening.
Yeah, keep listening. And you will find out as well as the listeners. So before we get started, a quick warning. We are going to be diving into some pretty dark waters. So if you're not feeling up to that, just switch us off and come back later. And if you do feel affected by anything we talk about, then please just get it out into the open. Talk to someone about it. If there's nobody immediately available, then the Samaritans in the UK and Ireland are there 24 hours. You can reach them on 116 123. Or if you're outside the UK and Ireland, we recommend Befrienders, who are affiliated with the Samaritans, and they have call centres in 39 countries. Have a look at befrienders.org. We've also listed these details and a few other options in the show notes. And so male mental health has become something that I think over the past maybe 2 or 3 years, it's certainly risen to the top of quite high on the news agenda. Whereas before it was, I think, something that we'll probably keep coming back to, which is we don't talk about that. We don't know how to talk about it. We're men. It's a bit embarrassing. We're not supposed to talk about it. We're supposed to man up. We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be
not cry.
Yeah, boys don't cry and all of that. We're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the sort of custodians of everything, and we just stay strong. And but I think that's changed quite a lot, and particularly when you see a lot of issues of male mental health coming into the news usually based on celebrity suicide. I think that's something
that's been a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when you first came to me with the idea of this podcast and we were talking about it, and you mentioned that statistic that the biggest killer of men under 45 is suicide. That's an amazing statistic.
Yeah, and that comes from CALM, the Campaign Against Living Miserably, which amazing organisation that focuses on male mental health, and hopefully we'll get them on at some point.
That is an important indicator amongst many that male mental health is an issue, right?
Yeah, that's clearly a big problem. And the reason we wanted to do this podcast really is that's sort of the mystery at the heart of the podcast, I think. Why so many men, running out of road like that before they get into middle age properly and start to, get into that time where we're both middle aged, where you can start to sort of relax a little bit and not worry so much about whether you're listening to the right music or whether you're
Dressed right.
whether you're dressed sometimes. And so yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think I'm realising that middle age is quite a nice time. Really,
It's a comfortable place to be.
Yeah. So it's a shame that a lot of men don't quite make it. You know, it's a tragedy that they don't. And
not that. I mean, we'll get to talk about our own mental health issues at some point, undoubtedly. But it's not that mental health issues go away at that age. But maybe you're in a position in life where you can deal with it in a different way. Yeah,
I think you probably naturally have more natural support around you, maybe, or you've been more comfortable in your own skin, and you understand. You've got your coping strategies. You've got all these things sorted out. Perhaps by then. So I suppose the thing we want to try and explore is why is UK culture, society, psychiatric culture failing all these men? Why are they finding it so difficult to carry on?
We're going to look at where you can turn for support and help, and we'll look at various different things that you can turn to, and not evaluate them, but look at the strengths of each, and that might help if you're like us, have suffered from mental health issues. That might help you to see ways that you could maybe look at exploring better ways of coping with it. I think that's a big thing, because I mean, to go into personal details yet, but when I first recognised that I had mental health issues, it was really stigmatised. I mean, we're talking 2000, so it's 15 years ago.
Right.
For me, that I first recognised it. Probably went pre that, but even that short amount of time, 15 years, it wasn't something I could talk about comfortably with my employees, and people I work with, my friends and family. I didn't feel I could. I think society's changed a lot since then.
Yeah,
it feels like it's moved on in the last few years.
I still think we're in the foothills, though.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I still think we've got that.
Yeah,
we've kind of managed to get there. People recognise it, and they're kind of okay to accept that. I think the progress has been, generally mental health has kind of got onto the agenda, and people are willing to accept that it is a thing. And now male mental health has found it sort of used that as a kind of foothold.
Yeah. And
now has managed to get itself into the higher profile. And whereas before it was more, as I said before, it's like, man up, get on with it.
And that's right.
I think there's a generational thing.
Cheer up.
There's a big, cheer up, yeah. And see, I mean, we'll probably come back to this when I talk about myself, but I really remember in my late teens, somebody quite close to me said, "What have you got to be depressed about?" When I was depressed, and so
I still hear that actually today, not about me, but when I hear people talking about other depressed people, even if they're not celebrities, even if they're just people that they know, they'll say, "Why? I don't see what they've got to be depressed about." So there's still a long way to go for a full understanding of There's not much going on in the media about it. I mean, there's the odd book which we'll recommend. Whatever we find that we think addresses it, but it's still, like you say, the foothills. It's still a long way for it being something that people can frankly and openly talk about. I think.
Yeah, because it's so misunderstood, I think, and because it hasn't been talked about for so long, it's not like, we suddenly understand it all.
No,
it's out, so it's time to begin trying to understand it. And I think it's so you shouldn't be sort of really, particularly generationally, thinking about people who find it difficult to understand and judging them for that and saying, dismissing them. I think it's all about the education process of letting them.
Yeah.
Because my dad would, if you said someone's depressed, my dad would probably think, okay, they're just sad about something.
Yeah.
The guttering is broken. And
that's right. They'll be all right when it's fixed.
But sort of, or they're kind of
their favourite TV show is been cancelled.
And that's something. And you go, I'm so depressed about that. And that's quite, idiomatically, that's true, isn't it? That's just something that you generally say. But depression is more. We'll talk about this a lot, obviously. But depression is more of an existential problem than a.
It's a bad word for it, actually, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
It's misleading because you can use that word in other contexts and it means something completely different. Yeah,
and I think it's been seen as quite a frivolous thing. I'm listening to the Smiths. I'm so depressed, and so we're going to try, without being too lofty about it, to try and educate a little bit, maybe, and just say this is what
our experiences.
This is what it feels like.
And hopefully that will resonate with people who are listening if they are feeling the same, or maybe we might even, we're going to set up, presumably, I don't know, we might set up a Twitter account or something,
I think
or an email or whatever.
Well, let's leave that. Let's not worry about social media. It's fine.
Maybe that would be a mistake. No, what I mean is people can maybe get in touch and talk about their experiences. We'd be happy to hear those.
Now, I must say, cats might come in at some point.
Okay, yeah.
So
there are none in at the moment.
We'll probably edit them out, but they might. And there's
That
one.
is weird.
That's a cat.
How did that happen?
Yeah, because I heard the cat was like...
Oh, I see.
And usually, one of my cats...
We'll do
Johnny,
that soon afterwards.
will hear people speaking and he'll want to get involved.
That was
There
so
he is.
weird.
So he will come in and go, can I contribute to this discussion about male mental health?
You know them
We'll go,
so
no,
well.
you're a cat. Fuck off. So he might come in.
Right,
Also, there'll be, as you just heard, I've used some choice language there. That's not to be cool. That's just naturally the way I speak. So we're going to try and be...
Natural, yeah.
One thing we're going to try and do is be totally honest.
I love it.
And be ourselves and be honest. We're not going
Yeah.
to be sort of just saying motherfucking every other word or whatever. But
No.
we will be ourselves and we're going to try and be honest about the way we're feeling. And we're not going to try and put too much of a front up there. So a quick word on the title. Emotional Cripples. The phrase comes from a woman called Valerie Solanas who became acquainted with Andy Warhol in the mid-60s in the factory in New York. And she was like a writer, playwright. She was later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And again, we'll come back to labels, we'll come back to all of that later. But at the time, somebody who behaved the way she did, she would have clearly just been dismissed as mental or crazy or psycho or whatever.
Yeah.
And
difficult
woman. Yeah, all those things. She gave Andy Warhol a play she wrote. The play was called Up Your Ass, which, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been recommissioned by CBBC recently. I assume it's quite pornographic.
I've never seen that even advertised anywhere. No.
Yeah, so Andy Warhol had a look at that and decided he wasn't going to put it on. And so she got it into her head that he was suppressing her work. And she had quite a radical feminist viewpoint, and she founded, or self-proclaimed to be the founder of this organisation she called SCUM as an acronym, the Society for Cutting Up Men. So
when you say quite, I mean,
it's fairly radical. It's sort of like the ISIS of feminism. There's no room for negotiation about.
And this is all Andy Warhol's fault then, so she may not...
Well, yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
I don't think it was his fault, to be fair to him. I think it was...
I think anyone presented with Up Your Ass would have had the same reaction.
So, it was actually published, I think, a couple of years ago.
Oh, right. Okay,
so,
we'll get a copy.
We'll have a look.
Yeah. We could do some readings.
Yeah, and just see where this came from.
Yeah.
But in her manifesto for SCUM, the Society for Cutting Up Men, she used this great phrase where she says that men are broken in terms of they are incomplete female chromosomes, and so therefore they are emotional cripples. They are effectively, incomplete human beings, and it's women who are complete human beings, and men are the sort of runts of the human litter. So we thought, well, let's own that, let's reclaim it.
Yeah,
it's a title for this podcast.
Yeah,
and
why not?
This is often something that's thrown at men, that they have low emotional intelligence as well. That this is perhaps feeds into this idea of men not talking about mental health issues and things, that they don't really empathise very well, or so
it's the right title, isn't it?
Yeah.
By the way, I'll throw this in. It may not make the cut, but
okay.
I was listening to the Jams Running on the Spot recently by complete coincidence, and
right.
it has a line in it: "Is we are the next generation of emotional cripples."
Ah, right.
Now I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Weller knew that sort of
familiar
in the
with Up Your
60s.
Ass.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where the title comes from, and as I say, we're reclaiming it. The word cripple is a little bit contentious. I think we've used it since 1973 to describe someone who has a physical disability. but
we're all right with it.
We don't apologise for that.
No,
in context, I think it works. There's a certain irony to it.
Yeah.
So if you want to go and look up a little bit more about Ms. Solanas, and she died quite young actually, and have a look at Up Your Ass.
Obviously, Andy and I are, we're talking about what we think about, but we really want to know what you think about as well. So you can contact us on an email, contact@emotionalcripples.com. I'll say that again, contact@emotionalcripples.com.
Can you say it one more time as well?
Yeah, contact at... You like it?
Yeah.
Contact@emotionalcripples.com. And there's a Twitter...
What was it again? Sorry. Go on, sorry.
That address again.
Go on. No.
And then the Twitter one is @EMCripples. EMCripples. So, feel free to fire anything you want at us. We can take it. But ideally, questions, thoughts,
feedback, just anything that
occurs really. Because
abuse obviously just
maybe temper that a bit.
Yeah. I mean, if you feel the need to do it,
then I suppose we
go for it.
We'll take it on the chin.
Yeah. It's just ideally, it's unlikely that if you say, we hate you,
fuck you,
it'll get onto the podcast.
Yeah.
We'll probably filter that out.
Yeah. It'd be much more useful if you said something that we could kind of work with.
Contact at emotionalcripples.com and at emcripples on Twitter. M for mouse. It doesn't stand for mouse.
No, it stands for...
it's a shortened version of Emotional Cripples because Twitter wouldn't let us do the full version. We thought we'd kick things off by laying ourselves bare. We're not naked as we do this, but I mean, metaphorically. By letting you know a bit about who we are and a few words on our own struggles with mental health. A few people might sort of worry about this and think we should keep it anonymous, but it's like that. I think it was Marilyn Monroe, maybe misattributed, where she said, if you can't accept me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best, which is quite good. So sort of trying to get, not because we want to feel better about unburdening, but because we want you to understand why we're doing this and a bit about who we are really. We've asked you to get in touch and share your own experiences, so we thought we kind of do it, and we should practice what we preach.
Yeah, go there first.
So to start with, I'm going to immediately deflect this onto Tim.
Yeah. It's funny because I've agonised over this a little bit, and I've realised in the course of thinking about it and talking about it that for me it wasn't immediately obvious what it was that triggered mental health. In fact, I didn't connect it to anything. But reflecting back, there was a particularly traumatic time that I had in my teens when I was 19. I was living in London.
It's quite a stable time, isn't it, for everyone?
Exactly. It's not the ideal time to be going through any traumas. Yeah. But my exactly. And I was my best friend died at that time. He was the same age. We'd been to school together. I was actually living with his sister. We were a couple. She had a breakdown, and the whole thing was very traumatic.
What happened to your best friend?
Well, he died because he had a brain hemorrhage. He was coming back from college on the train, collapsed in the station. Obviously, they rushed him to hospital. He was in a coma. We went to visit him in the hospital, hoping he'd pull through. So there was all that kind of drama.
So it was a total shock.
Total shock. Never got to say goodbye. Really horrible situation. And then following that, the breakdown of my girlfriend was really traumatic as well, and I don't want to go into too much of it, but because she's still around, and but that got really, really desperate.
Right.
She went into a mental institution. I was left alone in my flat in London. My response was to go raving.
Right. Yeah. So. So you thought, let's have a dance.
I didn't think
let's go for a dance.
A mate of mine did. He said, "You look really glum, Tim. Cheer up. I'll tell you what's good. This night down heaven."
He said, "Cheer up, it may never happen."
Yeah,
and you went, "It fucking has, mate. About 5 things have happened. I need to."
Yeah, there was no shoulder to cry on, unfortunately. So I ended up using hedonism as an escape route, which is why I think that escaped me I literally did that, and for the next 2 or 3 years, I was raving all the time. So
right. Now, what's interesting, I think, about this is that the distraction thing, because I think this is a theme we'll keep coming back to because I recognise this as a distraction to if you have lots of voices or worries or anxieties or things going on, things swirling around your head, then I think a lot of people will recognise the idea of trying to quieten those voices or that anxiety by distracting themselves with and a lot of people distract themselves in different ways. Some people might drink, take drugs, go raving as you did, and a lot of other people might climb mountains or something. I don't know, but there's some way to sort of distract themselves. Not
actually confront it.
Yeah.
Which to some extent took me years to actually get into a situation. Years later, when I went into psychotherapy sessions, when I actually started talking about it, but it was a lot longer away. So as I said, that was something that got unearthed. Even when I went on psychotherapy sessions, it wasn't the first thing that came up.
Right.
It was something that came up after a bit of digging.
Yeah.
So it's, I can't be sure that that's what later triggered depression in me.
Can I ask quite a delicate question at this point?
Please do.
Were there drugs involved when
There
you
were.
were raving?
When I was raving, yeah. Well, how could there not be?
Right.
You've been raving, right? Yeah, it's
yeah.
Yeah, no, I was what was I larging it? I think was the phrase used in the 90s.
There was a degree of largeness involved.
There was, yeah. It was constant. It was pretty much 2 or 3 years of that. On a regular basis. So I've got to say that wasn't very helpful in retrospect. At the time, it was an escape valve that really. But yeah.
But the question
don't
really,
recommend that to anyone.
The question really is how does it come to a point where you are distracting yourself, and when does that become toxic? Is a question, isn't it? Because for a lot of people, self-medication is the phrase, isn't it? You normally you muffle it all by whatever it might be, usually some sort of substance. But when do you realise? Did you get to a point where you thought this is too much?
No, I never overdid it. I don't think, because I was in a crew. I ended up with a gang of people, not in a nasty way, but a group of friends.
It sounds like you're sort of breakdancing, doesn't
it? The group of friends like you have, when you go raving, and they were great friends. They were good, supportive friends. A posse, that's it. But they were in it for the fun. They weren't on an escape trip.
Right.
Some of them were overdoing it way more than me.
So did you not feel that you were sort of along for the ride and?
I just got lost in it actually, and I made really good friends at the time. In some ways, I don't regret that period of my life.
So the question really is, did it help? Did you come through that, or was it just a way of sort of kicking it into the long grass?
Exactly.
Kind of thing?
In retrospect, I wish I'd confronted the issues then.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I wish I hadn't gone raving, because that is a great deal of fun. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I do wish I confronted the issues straight away instead of run away from them.
So at the time, given from the male perspective, given that you were in that situation where your girlfriend was suffering a lot because of what happened, was there any kind of opportunity? Did you remember feeling, well, I can't really talk about this. It's not what men do, and I just need to find a way to sort of keep it, to secretly deal with it.
It was even more unconscious than that. I didn't even think about talking to anyone about it.
Right.
Like nobody. It didn't occur to me to talk to anyone about it.
Right.
And then but
did no one come to you and say, "How do you feel about this? Are you okay?"
People may have done.
Yeah.
I don't know if I responded in any way. If they did, I'm saying that I literally can't remember. I mean, my brother was very supportive at that time, and he was. But I think I ignored. I literally switched from one group of friends to another and went out raving.
Right.
Feels like a bit of therapy now, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'll do my best, but I'm not qualified.
You. You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
No, I just mean, in some ways I still feel like I haven't tackled that time. It was really, really, I'm welling up as I'm thinking about it. But so it feels like the natural way to connect depression.
Yeah.
I should say, having read the Matt Hay book, which you're...
Yeah, we'll talk about later,
it doesn't need to be connected to something, does it? Sometimes depression isn't connected to something. So it's very hard to know whether you're being triggered by something or whether you're just experiencing an illness,
Well, I think it is an illness, I think that is a problem. I think what you're talking about really is almost like a sort of PTSD, aren't you, where you went through a really traumatic situation and you tried to mitigate it in quite an intense way by sort of trying to make it a background thing rather than a foreground thing.
Right.
So you fill the foreground with all the lights and the noise and the music and the drugs and the people
and the driving around the M25
and all of that becomes the centre of your world. Dominates your perspective, and then you can shove all this other stuff onto the how you feel about your friend and everything into the background. So it does sound like
even now it's hard for me to admit that was a traumatic incident. I just feel like I don't want to let that be something that affected me that way.
So do you feel guilty that you kind of that you did that?
There's loads of guilt, and I mean, I'm sure I could have acted more responsibly, and for my girlfriend, the people around me, myself.
You were 19 though, weren't you? To be fair, it's not a particularly mature age to be. I mean, there are lots of very mature and worldly 19-year-olds around. It's not, but it's not typically a 19-year-old male isn't the most sort of. It's wasn't it that Philip Larkin quote when he says the strength and pain of being young, and you've got this mix of those two things.
This bulletproofness, but also this.
And you can't really. You've got that sort of that pain, that vulnerability, but you've also got this feeling that you're invincible. So it's a strange mix, isn't it? And that sounds to me like a bit of what was going on there.
It does, yeah. It's been interesting talking about it again, but it seems for sure that it's connected with later feelings of anxiety, depression, and all the rest of what I've been feeling since then. But I now have various treatments. Well, I take citalopram, which is an
SSRT, isn't it?
That's right. Which helps, but it's very, very subtle. 20
selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Is that right?
Thank you. Yes, that's right. I wouldn't have.
What that means is, for people who don't know, I think, is that what that means is that your serotonin levels are reduced, aren't they? And the drugs, it's kind of, they're just all variants of. I mean, Prozac is just a trade name, isn't it?
Yeah. Citalopram, by the way, is spelled with a C. Citalopram. Yeah.
So when you started to take that, did you notice there was a kind of
very gradually? Yeah, it wasn't like a massive bang. You're suddenly flying. Yeah. Which is what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
No, it's more of a subtle thing. So over a few weeks, I started to feel the gloom that was literally over me all the time lifted a little, and suddenly you get this glimpse. It's a really weird feeling actually, because you suddenly think, oh yeah, this is like what normal life's supposed to be like. Do you know what I mean? Shit, I've forgotten. It's more like that than a sort of sudden like crazy happiness.
So ultimately, I mean, that's sort of what we're talking about, isn't it? A lot of people are going around with mental health, with undiagnosed conditions and undiagnosed traumas and all these things, and they just basically muddle through. Yeah. And there's some sort of a tipping point, or it becomes too much. Definitely. And they can no longer, shoulder that. No. And for me, that feels to me is what happens when people have mental health crises. Definitely. They're going around with all the stuff that they haven't really dealt with or confronted in any way, and something in the real world, pushes them over into a kind of crisis. Yeah. It wasn't many years later for me. But I do think that whole feeling of dealing with it by suppressing it can lead to this habit of mind, which is depression, which can make you forget sometimes that you're actually experiencing something really negative. Okay. See, so for me, I had, I think I'd be a bit more childhood with me. Right. Yeah, because I had quite a poor childhood. I had a situation where I lived with my grandmother, and I didn't really understand what was going on. It was quite it's a slum technically where we lived. Really? So we're really in full Yorkshire territory, where it was kind of, outside toilet sort of, and quite an unpleasant environment to grow up in, really. I assume my mum was sort of out working, and I didn't really pick up on that. But what really happened, I think what triggered things for me is that my father, I think it was kind of a one-night stand. My mum had me when she was 20. And so she was living a life. She's quite young, and my biological father sort of disappeared and wasn't interested. And I somewhere along the way, my stepdad, who my mum met later, with my real father. So I didn't really connect that this wasn't my real father. So he came more on the scene. They got married, and then there was two stepsisters from obviously his previous relationship. But for some reason, I just sort of assumed that he'd gone away somewhere and come back, and this was my real father. Right. And something just no one ever really explained it. And then what happened was, when I was about 17, a great time for this kind of thing to happen to you. Yeah. My mum showed me the obituary of my dad in the paper. Mm-hmm. So she said, "Oh, look, this is your real dad. He's dead." And I was like, "What? But he's upstairs." So. Oh, that must have been traumatic. Yeah, so the therapists love this. Whenever I've spoken to therapists, they can see them furiously writing down at this point. And from that, from 17, somebody saying, effectively, the person you think your dad isn't your dad, and your dad is dead. There's a double whammy. was a real trick, really difficult to.
And you must have felt surely that why didn't they tell me when he was alive so I could have met him and all
so
that
there's a bit of that, but now I understand the good intentions, the old road to hell, play with good intentions thing. They just thought he doesn't need to know yet, and then eventually it's too late.
Yeah.
And so they think, why should we bring it up now? He seems perfectly fine. And they assumed that I knew, I think, at some point.
Right.
So a lot of guilt around them. And then I think what happened from that was I just started to get a sense that I spun off in lots of, risky behaviour kind of directions. And then I started to get a sense that anything could change at any moment. That kind of, that anxiety of feeling that things aren't as they seem, what's real and what isn't real. So it was more about...
And you live with that since?
Yeah, so it's more about this idea that I think that's defined my adult years, thinking how sincere are people? Can I trust them?
Yeah.
Is something going to change?
Has somebody not told me something?
Yeah, and I think I would probably pinpoint that as a kind of a sort of pivotal moment that kicked off,
something.
And I think it probably manifested as a kind of a depression or a kind of an anxiety that has carried through. And I have seen quite a few therapists. I saw, when I was thinking about 18, I saw a psychiatrist, and he was, and again, it's almost like, when you go to the doctor, and the doctor examines you, and then they go, hang on a minute, and they bring the student in, there's a problem.
It says that secretary cancel my appointments for the onset.
It's a bit worrying.
Yeah.
They go, oh, interesting. Do you mind if I bring Janet in or something? And she comes in and goes, what's going on?
This is the one I was
stand there. This is really interesting. Yeah. That's a worry. Then, like I say, whenever I get to that point, if I whine about my poor childhood and then I say, oh yeah, when I was 17, and they perk up and they start furiously writing.
Yeah.
And so I assume that's because it sort of feels like the beginning of where you would have chronic, trust issues or issues about maybe not so much abandonment, but maybe the idea that things could just change at any moment. Whenever therapists say to me, how do you feel about your real father abandoning you?
Yeah.
Then I don't think he did really. I think it was more of he didn't want to be a father at that time. It wasn't like he had a look at me and went, I don't fancy that.
He never put that in writing.
He never went, I'd quite like to have a son. What have you got? Oh, no. I don't think so.
That would be devastating.
Yeah, that would be a bit upsetting. But generally speaking, I think there were probably, from what I know about it at the time, it was a kind of 19-year-old's one-night stand. And then,
yeah, you can imagine what that's like.
Yeah, and understandably, in the sort of whatever early 70s, you would go, forget it. I'm not for that yet. Yeah. So.
And do you find that you've seen a lot of therapists or something? They always focus on the father thing. They love it. Yeah. So does that mean that that's got too much attention, or do you think is the right trigger? I mean,
it's a strange thing, isn't it? I think I've probably, as you say, anxiety and depression are very similar. But I'd say I started taking sertraline because really it was more about anxiety in terms of trying to sort of function in a kind of in the world where you had to sort of put that aside and sort of get on with things. So just sort of get on with the world, get on with stuff. And I think
I know, me too. Even now I do.
Yeah, when I've been to therapists, it's been more about nothing suicidal. But when I've been to therapists, it's been that point where I've sort of run out of ideas about how to manage it. It gets quite difficult. Sort of comes in waves where it's like if you've had cancer and you're in a period of remission, it might come back. You're not definitely clear.
No.
So you might have a good period, but then you shouldn't get too complacent. I think it's fine. Because then I would just have, days where I just didn't feel like myself. It would be so sort of so severe, and I think it probably does come back down to that. It's fair enough for therapists to kind of focus on that as a kind of
it sticks out, doesn't it?
Yeah. But generally speaking, I think that mainly it's been CBT that's kind of helped rather than anything deeper. Or I assume CBT feels like a little bit of a sort of a light touch.
Yeah, what I liked about CBT, and it flows quite well onto NLP, which I'll talk about another time.
And Stoicism,
is that you take responsibility for the action you're going to do to come out of it. So you look for the trigger, don't you, as I recall? I haven't done it for a while, but you look for the triggers to the thought processes that's going to lead to anxiety or depression. And then you think through how you're going to get out of it. Is that something like that? I remember filling in a chart. That's what I didn't like about it. I used to have lots of charts for CBT where I'd have to go, this was the trigger, and then...
Yeah, they gave me homework a lot as well.
Yeah, a lot of homework. I didn't really like that. But yeah, I think it's on a good level of, rather than, I mean, the thing that I will say about NLP and CBT is that it's really anti-psychotherapy. And what they say is that if you're paying someone to talk about your problem all the time, it's never going to go away. The worst thing you can do is go, why do you have that? Well, I think it's because of this thing. And you end up spending like a year talking about your father and what he did to you or what he didn't do to you. And suddenly, actually, that's not the way towards recovery. That's just really indulging the issue and actually probably making it worse.
Yeah, see, I think the idea of recovery is a bit of a problem as well for me. The idea that you'll get to the promised land.
Yeah, I agree,
And I think, as we mentioned Stoicism, and I think Stoicism is probably the closest I'll ever get to a religion. I have no, religious faith, but I think Stoicism is something that I imagine, the way I feel about Stoicism is the way I imagine people must feel about a religious faith, and that it's something that underpins their actions or the way they try to respond to things. And like a moral, I suppose if you're religious, you have a moral framework, but something about the good sense of Stoicism that kind of seems to...
Absolutely. And one of the things that NLP gets from that is that if you ever feel anything negative, instead of starting the spiral towards like, oh, why am I feeling like this? Oh, I'm so shit. I always feel like... the first thing you think is, what do I want instead of this?
Right.
So a bit like Stoicism. So NLP is, what do you want instead? If somebody comes to you with a problem, you don't start analysing the problem like psychotherapists go and go, well, why is that? And what caused that 10 years ago? You go, what do you want instead of this feeling?
So it's
and how are you going to get forward? Yeah. And I like that. Has been a really enabling thing for me. And CBT works in a similar way, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Stoicism, we keep mentioning it, but I mean, Stoicism is kind of misunderstood, but I'm sure we'll get into it in future episodes. But effectively, Stoicism is all about you can choose to the way you respond to something. You have you have the control over how you respond to something, and you can lay conditions to help yourself respond in a healthy way rather than an unhealthy way. And you can recognise triggers and those kind of things.
It's like an agency that you have to be responsible for your...
So I think Stoicism and CBT are very, very connected. And
it's funny though, because we know what... You and I both know what we're talking about. And we've said this earlier, not on the podcast, but that when you talk to people and they think depression is just being a different level of sadness. But like, only yesterday I was in this state of anxiety, and it's like, for me, it is, I can't do anything. I'm overwhelmed. I have to sit down or lie down, and I still get that, and that's a regular thing.
Well, overwhelming feeling is, I think, again, this is going to be a recurring theme, because it's kind of like we have Stone Age brains, don't we? So we have Stone Age brains in a very complex...
we're not ready for this one.
We're not ready. The Stone Age brains are basically, they have 4 or 5 things that they need to worry about. Where's the food coming from? Where's the threat? There's
partner.
Very, very limited things to worry about. I mean, I'm imagining a Flintstones
scenario. I'm seeing that.
But generally speaking, if you were living in that time, you weren't thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, the Wi-Fi is not very good here,
or have I got enough in my pension?
Or there's just thousands of things
that overwhelm you.
Thousands. If you're gonna be anxious about something now, then you've spoiled the choice, aren't you? And your brain is not ready for that kind of choice, not ready for that kind of oppression.
Well, that leads to a theme I wonder if we'll touch on, which is the way the modern world is impacted on. By modern, I mean the digital age, because there's lots of talk of things like, well, the social media, iPhones, that they have impacted on our well-being.
But I think it just translates. Anxiety just finds its it's quite,
it's what its focus.
It will find something, and if it's in there, and so my idea with therapy is if I could find some form of therapy that means I accept it as something that's always going to be around. But I can prevent it from gathering too much in one field and something compulsive. So whether that's health or worries about external things or all kinds of stuff. So So really, yeah. So there we are. I mean, I think
That's probably more than enough.
that's more than enough. Yeah. So we are. That's who we are, and we're going to be moving on to talking to other guests hopefully through the series, and we're going to have each episode. You're not going to have to hear us going about ourselves like this every episode. What we're going to do is to have something specifically how things are going that week briefly.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to the rest of the show. Now for the bit where we talk to a guest, someone related to male mental health, either a practitioner or perhaps someone in the public eye who's been open about their own mental health. We call it talking therapy. No, that's good. Or perhaps men talk, mental, like mental with a K. Forget that. It's the guest spot. And we touched on CBT, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, earlier, and we're delighted to welcome our first guest, Ali Binns, who is a CBT practitioner. Now, we're doing this over Skype, so there are one or two weird noises, a little bit of interference, I think, but generally you can hear what's being said, and we'll get better at that. It's just a pilot. Give it a chance. So, Ali, welcome to the show. And if you could start by just saying who you are, what you do, and how you came to be doing it.
Okay. I work as a CBT therapist in Bath, and I work with all kinds of clients with a wide range of problems, from anxiety to depression, health anxiety, social anxiety, problems with confidence, self-esteem, a whole mixture of things really. I work for myself. I retrained about 3 years ago after working in publishing, and I really wanted to do something along these lines because CBT's helped me in the past, and I've always kind of felt that I'd really like to be able to share some of that and help other people with that and help them through their kind of difficult experiences too.
Right, and once Tim and I have spoken about this and just trying to work out exactly what CBT is, and there's lots of different answers to that question, it seems.
So I think CBT is best explained by a quote from Epictetus, who is a Stoic philosopher, and obviously he was sort of hanging about 2,000 years ago.
He was knocking about. He was sort of just being all Greek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this quote is, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things.
Right.
So I think for me that's kind of the heart of CBT.
Sexist. Sexist as well.
Oh, well. Actually, he's using that word to encompass all of mankind.
Well, you take his point. There was a different era.
Yeah, they weren't so concerned with that in those days, I suppose.
So they're concerned. So what he's saying there is it's not the actual events that are the problem. It's not the things that happen to you. It's your response to them. It's how you react to them.
Yeah, and I think it's not trying to gloss over the fact that life has adversity, but it's accepting that even in adversity, we have the potential to be able to make things worse for ourselves by the way we think about things. So equally, the reverse is true, that if we're able to sort of look at our thoughts and manage our thoughts maybe in a different way, then we might be able to alleviate some of that sort of inevitable suffering that we might experience in circumstances.
Yeah, it's that old pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, and that's kind of what underpins Stoicism, isn't it? And what underpins CBT. So CBT and Stoicism, I've sort of stumbled across this accidentally because I read a great book on Stoicism called the Daily Stoic last year, which was really good because it gives you a page. We'll put this in the show notes. It gives you every day of the year a kind of a sort of rumination on an element, facet of Stoicism, and usually pretty everyday stuff. Not just difficult translated old sort of Greek texts, but it generally sort of tries to do it in the way that we live today. Because we touched on this earlier in the podcast, where we talk about we've got Stone Age brains, but we've got to deal with thousands and thousands of potential anxieties. And Stoicism, I suppose, is a way, I guess, of maybe quietening a bit of that noise. But generally, in terms of cognitive behaviour therapy, when you say it does sound quite easy. When I mentioned this to somebody the other week, they said the problem with Stoicism is it's how you do that. You can't. How do you control? How do you change the way that you respond to a situation? How do you train yourself to change the way that you respond to a situation?
It's definitely not easy, because you would be trying to change the thinking habits of long-standing, possibly a lifetime's worth. So, each time you have a particular type of thought, then you're creating a neural pathway, and the more that neural pathway gets worn, the more embedded it is. So in CBT, you're actually trying to create new ways of thinking, new neural pathways. Sometimes in CBT, before people might change their behaviour, for example, if people might want to change their behaviour in a social situation, they might want to sort of actually, before they go into that environment, they might want to spend time actually visualising themselves in that situation, thinking and acting in the way that they would like to. So you're already starting to sort of kickstart the process before you really tackle your fear.
So you're sort of preparing. You know that you're going into a situation that's going to be stressful for you. So maybe you struggle with social situations and you're thinking, I'm going to go to a party tonight. And you know that you're preparing for that party and for it to be a pleasurable experience and not, too anxious. You have to think to yourself before you go. You have to think, okay, I'm going to react in this way, this is going to happen. So you can't change what's going to happen at that party, but you can perhaps predict the kind of situations that might occur that could cause you stress. Is that right?
Yeah, because you can't control for that. I mean, that's part of the point, is that people's reactions are unpredictable. You can't read other people's minds, you can't account for what they might do. But by being able to sort of, the way we kind of think about it in CB2, we kind of look at it as in vivo and in vitro. So in vivo is practicing the new skills in real life.
Yeah.
You might practice them in vitro. That might be in the therapy kind of room itself, or it might be just actually imagining the situations in your mind before going out into a real life situation, because that will help to sort of change those neural pathways we were talking about.
So generally, when you try to kind of react in that way, though, you'll spend a year thinking about this problem that it was in my childhood or something. Then you just keep going over it and over it and over it, and it's indulging it. And Tim was saying earlier that one thing CBT doesn't have any truck with is psychotherapy in general, because it's a bit of a racket in that respect, and that your CBT is quite practical. Is that right? You get to a point where you think you've helped the other person, and then you sort of send them on their merry way rather than trying to keep them there for years and years. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that we don't ignore the past in CBT. For some people might come along and yes, they might want to go over their history a little bit. It does depend on the nature of the problem. But in CBT, the focus will always be coming back to how has the past impacted perhaps on the way you're thinking now? How can we help you now? How can we move forwards? How can we help you better to manage your life going forwards?
Right.
Accepting the difficulties that you might have had, accepting what might have gone on in your past, which could be anything for any person.
So when
it might be helpful to have a little chat about that, but it's not where the focus would be.
So when it comes to men, what kind of problems, because we're trying to focus on male mental health.
Just looking at the number of sort of across my clients, for sure it's sort of clearer that less men are sort of referring themselves for therapy. I think I read somewhere recently that only a third of people in therapy are male, which is quite surprising.
A third?
Surprising, yes.
Right.
So it's tipped very much in favour of the female population. But in terms of what's perhaps specific to the male population, I suppose there are a lot of cultural expectations on men, such as perhaps being the main breadwinner, being the protector or the strong one.
Yeah.
Sort of certain cultural and social ideas about how men ought to be. Those can cause problems, especially if they don't, if particular guys don't fit in with that stereotype of how men are kind of supposed to be. Also, I think There's possibly a big problem with men admitting vulnerability, whether that's among their peers or their family. And I think, that might be a big part of why men perhaps don't seek help and support.
So when you're working with men, do you find that they're a little bit resistant, or they take things on board quite easily, or do you sort of find that they're actually quite difficult to get through to?
Actually, what I've found is that men take to CBT very well.
Right.
I don't know if it's because it's quite an attractive therapy to men because it's quite practical.
Yeah, there's no bullshit, maybe.
Yeah, and also it kind of gives you kind of solutions to managing and handling emotions in a more healthy way. I think some other types of therapies may have a kind of reputation for having to sort of sit there being vulnerable, crying a lot, being provoked to cry. Of course, crying is fine. It's natural, normal, but perhaps, that idea of some of other types of therapies may kind of put people off.
Yeah.
But he is offering something a bit more practical and goal-orientated as well. Yeah,
and there is that sense with men, isn't there, that they like to solve problems. They like to have a problem that's solvable, that they see as solvable. And perhaps women are more open to sort of a long-term approach to something, and men kind of just want to get their hands on it and fix it nice and quickly, get their mates around and open the bonnet and have a look inside.
And that is what you're doing with CBT. You're kind of teaching people to kind of look under the bonnet of your brain almost and kind of see what's in there. How does this work?
Yeah.
What can I do about it? How can I manage it?
As opposed to, as we say, we're not going to keep slagging off other approaches, but as opposed to something like, for example, psychoanalysis, which is a much more long-term sort of deep dive into, the murky sort of waters of the past and things that may have turned you one way or another or influenced your thinking in one way or another, and that's a much more long-term complex approach, isn't it? And so perhaps perhaps that could be something that's quite attractive to men about CBT. Each person we speak to, we're trying to get a bit of a takeaway that they can, something that whoever's listening to this podcast now can maybe think, I'm going to go away and try that, just something practical.
Yeah, I've got a nice little exercise that people can try at home. It's an exercise called 5 senses. So it's an exercise that's useful if you find yourself worrying or kind of getting caught up in thoughts about the past or the future. Then it's a good way of helping to sort of focus your attention and bring it back to whatever you're doing, present moment.
Are you going to do it on me? Do I have to do this now?
No, you don't.
Okay, right. Is it something that you can just sort of note and take away and do it later, right?
Yeah, I reckon people just kind of jot. It's easy enough to jot down and do later.
Okay.
So basically, the idea of the technique is that you use all of your 5 senses, your sound, sight, touch, smell and taste, to bring yourself into the present moment. So you take a few slow, deep breaths just to begin, and you start to become aware of your surroundings, your environment. First of all, you're going to ask yourself the question, what are 5 things I can see right now? And that might be, a table, a sign on the wall, a person walking by. Then you're going to ask yourself, what are 4 things that I can hear? You might have to tune in really carefully for that. Might be a clock, might be something passing by outside, might be something in the room. Next, what are 3 things I can feel? That might be your feet on the floor, might be the feeling of your trousers against your legs. You've got to think quite hard, what can you feel? Then ask, what are 2 things I can smell? So it gets harder as you go through. And finally, what is 1 thing that I can taste? Might be the taste of coffee, might be nothing at all. Just you've got to think through the answers to each of those questions quite slowly, just taking it in, and hopefully that can sort of break you out of any kind of cycles of kind of unhelpful thinking.
Great. And when you say unhelpful thinking, that's that's something I keep hearing quite a lot in terms of when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned something that stuck in my mind about the difference between concern and anxiety, which is a concern of something that's tangible, perhaps, as opposed to anxiety. Which would you define anxiety as something as perhaps where concern has reached a point where it's unmanageable?
Yes. So there's quite a good definition of anxiety is when you sort of put it this way. So anxiety is when you have taken a threat, real or imagined, and you have overestimated the nature of the threat, and you've also kind of combined that with your own underestimation of your own ability to cope with that threat. And that is a recipe for anxiety.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. That's a great technique for everyone to try. And I think we'll wind it up. If you can let us know what your contact details are. If people are thinking, she sounds good, I'll have her as my therapist, please. Are you taking clients at the moment?
Yes. My doors are always open. Welcome.
Okay. So what are your details?
So my website is alibins.co.uk and my Twitter is @alibins.
Okay, thanks, Ali. We'll put all that in the show notes as well, so if people want to get in touch with you. Thanks for your time today.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Okay, you have reached the section of the show called Media Share, and we're going to recommend something, and one thing each, something to read, watch, consume, download, play with. Could be a film, TV, streaming show, anything. Something that is related to male mental health, or perhaps could help with a mental health issue. Something that maybe features a strong, positive representation of male mental health in some way. So, Tim, what have you?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with an app which I've downloaded for my iPhone. It's iOS only at the moment.
Yeah.
It's called Moment, and there is an Android version coming. So, Android listeners, the point of this app is actually related to something that we said earlier, which is that I don't know if there's any evidence for this, but there's a lot of talk that the modern digital lifestyle can contribute to anxiety and depression. Right now, I'm going to save any references to proof of that for the moment, but I certainly feel anecdotally that is the case. My use can sometimes spiral too high. Moment tracks how you use your phone. It also takes you through ways to manage it better. So I'm doing something at the moment within Moment called Phone Bootcamp, which every day gives you a new task. Like day one, put down your phone for 30 minutes. Probably the hardest one was on day 3, where I had to delete my most used app. That caused a moment of anxiety, but actually
delete your most used app.
Yeah. It challenges you to go, what we because it looks at all your activity and says, you use this app too much, delete it.
Right.
It's pretty intense.
But what was that? Facebook? Isn't
no, it was actually Flipboard. Don't know if you know Flipboard.
Yeah.
It's a sort of magazine type thing where I was just constantly browsing.
But that might not be a bad thing, though. Do you use it a lot?
I did it anyway.
What if you use Moment a lot?
Yeah, it's meta, isn't it? Yeah, it gets too meta. I mean, obviously it gives you the choice. You don't have to do it. But I thought actually I would go with it, and it certainly helped. Right through to things like don't take it in the bedroom, little tasks like that. And I also found it useful that it tracked how often I use certain apps, so I could see whether I was overusing it. I'm currently, don't know if you know how often you pick up your phone, but I can tell from this that I use it 3 hours a day, and I need to get that down to 2 hours a day.
Wow.
The point for me is it seems to be helping with some aspects of my anxiety, for sure. And that sort of modern day ADHD that you have where you think, oh, have I looked at Twitter recently? Or when, that kind of thing does need managing. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, we all know that there's a social ill in everyone looking at their phones too often. And
I think that it's become, the thing that's annoying me at the moment is where you talk to somebody and they have a look at their phone while they're talking to you.
Yeah.
They go,
not there
I'll just browse Facebook while I'm having this conversation.
Yeah.
Which seems rude to me.
Yeah, it's
rude.
rude.
It seems a little bit old-fashioned.
Yeah, no, it's definitely rude. It means they're absent. But do you feel it contributes to?
I don't think it means absent.
health?
I think it means that they're sort of there's something about somebody deciding that you're not worth their full attention.
Yeah.
There's something, maybe that's a bit arrogant.
Yeah.
But But I think if you're having a conversation with somebody, then it seems...
Should be something you focus on.
Yeah, it just seems the polite thing to do to give them your full attention.
Do you think that overuse of phones or any technology could contribute to ill mental health in any way? Even in a marginal way?
I suppose any compulsion, anything where you feel a compulsion.
And it's been described as an addiction when you have to look at it first thing in the morning. Simon Sinek said if that is the case, then you're probably addicted to your phone. Yeah. So that in itself would be an unhealthy relationship with technology, perhaps.
Yeah, if you think about something like alcohol, people say being addicted to drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Then it's a compulsion. It's the same kind of compulsion that you cannot get by without looking at your phone. You can't get by without having a drink. Or something.
Yeah.
Then it's surely in the same.
It's certainly got a part to play.
The same ballpark. Yeah, that you can't function unless you. So I mean, if you had a day where you weren't allowed to look at your phone, then I'm sure a lot of people would really struggle with that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a problem. It's a compulsion.
No, and it's hard to tell how much that plays into depression or anxiety. But for me, I do feel I want to get it under control. I do feel better having taken this course on Moment, and it's a useful thing to do. So I'm highlighting that one. It's iOS only, but it's also going to be available on Android. You can go and look at it on the web, inthemoment.io.
Okay.
Check it out.
I've got a book. This book is called Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig, who's about to release a new book later this year, I think, called Notes from a Nervous Planet, which is all about anxiety. So we're hoping to get him on. Yeah, I'll be ruthlessly pestering him at some point. So what's good about this book is that it talks about his experience of depression, anxiety.
This is Reasons to Be Alive.
Reasons to Stay Alive.
Stay Alive, yeah.
And it's about he used to live and work in Ibiza during when the real kind of party years of Ibiza, when the big super clubs were it was this kind of hotbed of hedonism and debauchery, and he used to be part of that promotional scene. And so what's interesting about it was the way he begins the book of his moment of crisis, where he goes to a cliff edge and pretty much literally stands on the edge of the cliff and contemplates throwing himself off. And
it's really well written, that part. That's the bit I've read.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because of the honesty, because of the fact that he's laying it bare. That's something that really comes out through the whole book. But it's also a really powerful a sort of antidote to all the things that he feels are contributing to his condition, his mental health problems. As we've just been talking about with lots of compulsions to keep checking things, and society's view of things, and the way the world is set up. And he has a really good way of looking at it, and he says the world is increasingly designed to depress us, and that happiness isn't very good for the economy. So he says if we're happy with what we had, why would we need more? How do you sell an anti-aging moisturiser? You make somebody worry about aging. How do you get people to vote for a political party? You make them worry about immigration, etc., etc. So it's about the idea of
media.
Of making people unhappy, reminding them that they're unhappy about something that is being monetized.
Wow.
It's his way of saying, but don't despair, all is not lost. And
he does describe depression very well.
He does, and explains all the kind of things we touched on earlier about it being an existential problem. And it's a really powerful response to something that he thought would consume him, would end up ultimately he'd end up losing his life over it, and he got very close to that and managed to pull back. And so it's a kind of a recovery story, a survival story, but written by somebody who's a very good writer, who's also has a kind of good sense of narrative, good sense of fiction. A lot of books that you read, self-help books, they just read a little bit too academic for my taste. They're a bit like journals, a bit dry. The content's fine, but they're not very consumable, And this is the opposite. This is something that you'll probably read very quickly. It's quite a short book. A nice size as well.
I can't tell because I've got it on my Kindle, and you can never tell on the Kindle.
It's like a strange sort of height. It's a little bit shorter than usual.
Right.
But there's something about it, and I noticed that I was feeling unwell last year and quite a lot of anxiety, and I went away to Lanzarote, and we'll come back to this because this is quite a theme, that I find Lanzarote a really relaxing place because it's quiet and not in a physical sense. It's conceptually very quiet because advertising is banned.
Is it?
There's no street advertising. There's no buildings over, I think, 2 stories or something. And it's a really interesting place. People dismiss it as just some sort of, stag weekend place or something. So everywhere you go, you don't see any advertising. You don't see people telling you what to buy, telling you what to watch, what to think, what to do. So I find it a really relaxing place
that makes
to
me
be.
want to go there.
You could go to the right place in Lanzarote and you wouldn't see any chains. You wouldn't see anything. You just see quite a simple, sort of easy, sort of very kind of quiet and calming kind of world.
That sounds exactly what I need. Sometimes.
So anyway, I was feeling quite anxious, and so I had a few days there, and I was writing something. But I took Reasons to Stay Alive with me, and I'd already read it, and I found that it's just one of those books that feels
you can go back to
a little bit of a companion. And as I said, talking about Stoicism, it must be that feeling of someone who's deeply, a Christian, and they like to have a Bible with them or something.
Yeah.
It's all this wisdom in there. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in it, and it's a very wise, funny, honest, often quite a harrowing book. But at the end of it, you really understand. You understand a lot more about what depression and anxiety is, and how even when you're at the bleakest moment, when you're as he was literally standing at the edge of a cliff, there is a way to get back from that.
Awesome.
So yeah, thanks for listening, and it'd be great if you could go to the iTunes store and leave us a review, some feedback,
or a rating,
especially
anything. If you liked it. Well, mainly if you liked it, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you hated it, then it's not a big problem if you to leave some feedback.
They didn't.
Yeah, but just just say 2 stars. Don't say I hate you or anything like that. Just try and
tone it down.
Yeah,
we have got feelings.
Be civil.
Yeah, but we want to get this out there. We want people to hear this and hopefully join in the conversation. So that really helps. If you can do that, we'd really appreciate it.
I think it's the algorithms.
Yeah.
The algorithms.
It always is.
Yeah. Please leave some feedback.
That was really good, please. Yeah, please. That's my version of please.
We would really appreciate that. We know this will get better. It'll get tighter. We'll get guests on there. Well, hopefully Stephen Fry will pop in at some point as usual.
Yeah.
So
please, we can only improve it if we hear from you. So please, give us some feedback.
No, it's getting a bit desperate.
You can get in touch with us on the email contact@emotionalcripples.com or on the Twitter handle EMCripples.
EMCripples. @EMCripples.
That's the one. @EM.
Not at the word.
No, the @ sign. Yeah. The one they use on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, the one that everyone knows about. We shouldn't waste time explaining.
@EMCripples. So we really like to hear your thoughts, however incisive or brutal, but also hopefully supportive, but also
banal.
Yeah, banal or
Some those banal thoughts is fine.
Shocking thoughts also welcome. And any insights, maybe somewhere closer to Lanzarote that is just as good, because I can't really afford to go there very often, or anything that you want to talk about, we'd love to hear from you.
Anything that's particularly in this episode, I guess that the old thing is, if you've been affected by the issues in this episode, that there might be a lot of people out there who have we've touched on something that's touched a nerve with you, so let us know about it. We'll be discreet, be anonymous if you like. It's up to you. Let us know how you want us to refer to you, and we'll.
Shall we say we default to anonymity unless you say that's not all right? So feel free to do that,
or use a handle.
Yeah, strange.
Use a nickname, Luke Skywalker 8635 or something.
Use that one. And hopefully we'll be reading some of those out in the next while.
Unless it's Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
Because if Mark Hamill contacts us, then...
he better use something else.
Yeah.
No, we're really looking forward to hearing from you. And, the whole spirit of this is really sharing. So we hope that by hearing our stories and other stories like it, you'll feel that you're not in this alone, and that, we can get over this together in some kind of way. Hippie.
How are we going to do that? Is there going to be a meeting?
Yeah, we'll all meet up at the end.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we say who we are.
Oh, yeah, so I'm Tim Tucker.
Yeah, I'm Andrew. I'm Andrew. I'm going to say Andrew, not Andy, actually. Let's do that again. That was messy.
Emotional Cripples was devised and performed by Andrew Lowe and Tim Tucker. Designed by Stuart Bache. All music by The Weathermonger.
If you have been affected by the issues in this podcast, you can call the Samaritans in the UK on 116 123, or if you're outside the UK and Ireland, check out befriendus.org. You'll find a link in the show notes.